Let's talk about the type of questions you're likely to be asked. The type of questions. Now, you'll see in the workbook that is part of this workshop, and you'll find in the relevant links, probably below somewhere, I would hope, but you'll find in the links, but certainly on Moodle, you'll find the workbook, and there are a list of questions that you can go through and ask yourself and try to answer, or even better, find a friend and bribe them with, well, I was going to say bribe them with a pint or a coffee. Not going to be able to do that externally. Maybe you can take a rain check on that promise. But, find a friend who perhaps you don't even need to bribe, a true friend, and go through these questions with them. Ask them to ask you those questions. Presumably you have to do this on Skype or whatever else, but it doesn't matter how you do it, just have someone ask you these questions, and if you can't find someone, just ask yourself. But you see that these questions are categorized to types. So what are the types of questions? You get opening questions. Opening questions. So that's meant to be a smooth kind of entry point into the Viva to get not just you but the examiners into the right mindset. So questions like, what led you to choose this topic? And remember, this doesn't have to be a strictly academic answer. Give the genuine answer. If there's a story behind it, provide that story. Usually that's the most interesting and titillating part for examiners, but also for the audience at large. People like to know what's gone on behind the research. Then you will have questions that probe your contribution to knowledge. So we talked quite extensively about that. But they might ask specifically things like, what is your most important contribution to the field? They may ask you to refer to a particular aspect and why it's relevant. So a particular aspect of the project and why it's relevant. They might ask you to describe your thesis in one sentence. That's quite a common one. However they choose to phrase it, it will be something to do with contribution. And not just of the thesis, could be of particular chapters, hence the importance of zooming in and zooming out as part of your preparation. There'll most certainly be questions about your research design, method, methodology, approach, whichever are relevant. Remembering, of course, that strictly speaking, a methodology is a study of methods, not the actual method that you used. But of course, a methodology is the groundwork you engage with to land on a method, to provide the rationale for your method. And you're likely going to be asked questions on that. Why did you choose this method and not that method? What was your methodology? In other words, how did you decide on this particular method? But also a theory, why you've taken a certain theory, or why did you take this approach, that kind of thing. Then you have questions about your understanding, so the understanding of the field, of your work, of the relation that your work bears to the field, understanding its significance and importance, understanding key terms, concepts, theories that you employ. They want to see that you can articulate those on the spot, that you have a working knowledge of them and understanding. Questions about findings and conclusions. Findings, again, if that's relevant, usually that's relevant for those who are doing some sort of empirical research. But we can also take findings to mean your overall argument, your conclusion. Perhaps you've provided a new reading of a certain thinker, so you found things in that thinker that others haven't before. There'll be questions inviting self-criticism and self-analysis. So this is why, as we said earlier, in zooming out, it's important to identify weaknesses so you can anticipate those questions and have a relatively ready-made answer to provide. And finally, you'll have closing questions, so things that just kind of round things off. So there'll be questions such as, is there anything you wished we asked about your thesis? What are you proudest of in the thesis? If you're going to continue with research, what kind of research will you do? Or is there anything that relates to your thesis that you would wish to expand on? Those kinds of things that are a bit more open-ended, a bit easier to answer, and just kind of round things off nicely. And when you start hearing those sorts of questions, unless they've explicitly told you it's the close, then that is your nudge to let you know you're getting to the close. Now, you want to practice with the virtual setting in mind, particularly those of you who are going to be doing your Viva in the next couple of months. It's not going to be in person, it's going to be online. So that's going to change the nature of things a bit. So you want to ensure that you have actually used something like Skype or Zoom before, so you know what to expect. Check your internet connection, see that it's good enough, what kind of lag you experience, because lag can be difficult. Usually our conversations are quite dynamic, and we identify natural points in which to interject or jump in or answer, and they're very time specific. So if there is lag, that timing is messed up and it throws us off, and it can feel quite awkward and be very distracting, especially if you're someone like me who needs to get into a certain flow in order to articulate yourself effectively. It can disrupt the flow, so it takes some getting used to. So do try these things out. That's why, again, it's really important to find a friend to practice with, or a family member over Skype or Zoom or Teams or whatever. That will allow you to check your internet connection, see what the lag time is like, how you would deal with lag, how you feel having a little version of yourself down there in the bottom. I always find that distracting. I end up looking at that. Perhaps I'm a narcissist, I don't know. But the point is, there are all these tiny subtle variables that we can easily take for granted when it comes to virtual Vivas that are actually potentially quite disruptive. Pick the right setting too. So, if you have, I don't know, Disney toys in the background, probably not all that appropriate, or personal affects. So find a blank wall if you can in the house, or just something like books behind you, something a bit more formal. Still dress formally too, if you can. You probably don't need to take a shower, but I would advise it anyway. Just to feel freshen up, treat it like a proper day. Start your day properly, like you would with any other day, but especially like you would with a tactile, in-person Viva. Be prepared for it. It has a huge psychological effect. It gets you in the right headspace. Okay. I want to get on to answering tough questions. What if you don't know the answer? What if you don't understand the question? What if your mind goes blank? Or anything else for that matter? Well, there's actually a pretty simple way to get around this. Firstly, if you don't know, don't make it up. Just don't. It will be so obvious that you are trying to fill in gaps on the fly, that you're trying to improvise, and it will lose your credibility. The examiners will become a bit more suspicious of the answers that you provide following that. And it will just give a bad impression, and that's not what you want to do. Primarily because being a scholar and academic, and remember, the PhD is about getting that license that allows you to be considered one. Being an academic or scholar means being frank about limits to your knowledge, limits to your understanding. So if you can't answer something, say that you can't answer it. However, don't just merely say, I don't know. Articulate. In other words, go into more detail. Tell the examiners why it is you're not really sure, why you don't know. There must be a reason why you don't know. You haven't read that particular aspect of work. Why not? Why were you not able to read that particular aspect of the work? What do you know that might be relevant to the question? How do you think you could answer it based on what you do know? And that's not a case of making things up. You're being very clear with the examiners in that case. You're saying, I don't really know directly, but I suspect, based on my understanding, that probably yada, yada, yada. So you're still admitting that you don't know, but you're not just simply remaining passive, inert, and stating, I don't know. You're going beyond that. You're acknowledging the limit, but you are also engaging in a frank, mature, intellectual conversation. You're entertaining that dialogue, and you can even throw it back on them. For example, well, okay, I haven't actually considered that aspect because it wasn't primarily relevant to my research, and of course I was quite time bound. Though I can see why you've asked that question. I suppose my initial feeling would be blah blah blah, but I'm quite curious. Why precisely have you asked that question? Do you already have an answer, or is it something? Was it a genuine question you have, something that you feel hasn't really been explored yet? Turn it into a dialogue. Now, what if you don't understand the question? That happens quite often. Sometimes the way that we deliver a question ends up being clunky, long-winded, verbose. We use too many technical terms. So it's just a matter of asking the examiner to rephrase the question. And that's fine. That's completely legitimate. So you just say, I'm very sorry. Do you mind rephrasing that question? Because I'm not quite sure I grasp what you are asking exactly. And they'll do so. And the chances are, by rephrasing the question, they'll drop in a word that's just enough for you. That will be the trigger to get you going, get the neurons firing, make those connections. Now I know the answer. If they rephrase it and you still don't understand, then it may be the case that they're using a term that's throwing you off. Try and identify the term and hone in on that. So, for example, you would say, you're talking about phenomenological bracketing. In what respect do you mean that exactly? Because I'm not entirely sure. Something like that. Keep asking for reiterations of the question until you grasp it, or until it becomes clear that maybe you just don't know the answer, and then we're back to the first point. How do you deal with a question that you don't know how to answer? What if your mind goes blank? Whoa, that's a common worry. Common worry, and it does happen. I'm not going to lie to you, because we're nervous. And if you're anything like me, when you're nervous, your mind can just go utterly and truly blank, and you sit there in silence, and then you feel horrified at the silence. And this makes the duration of the silence seem a lot longer than it actually is, which horrifies us furthermore. Well, the important thing is if it's due to nerves, take a moment, be comfortable with the silence. As said, it's not as long as you think it is. Take a breath. If there's water in front of you, and there should be, take a sip. Even that is a nice, that action of sipping, it's a holding pattern. It allows you to it's a prop that allows you to stay quiet without causing any anxiety, okay, or any perceptions of anxiety. So just take the water and think about it. And if you need a moment to think about it, take a moment to think about it. Don't rush into an answer. I tell you now, the examiners would much rather you take a considered approach than just kind of charge in like a bull to try and give an answer. Speed is not what they're going to be impressed with. It's a well thought out answer that they're going to be impressed with. Now, if after giving yourself a moment and reassuring yourself, taking a sip of water doesn't do the trick, and your nerves are really going, you can tell them, I'm really sorry, I'm just feeling a bit nervous, could you give me a moment? Or, if you're not quite prepared to go to that point yet, you could just ask them to rephrase the question. That's going to buy you a bit more time to compose your thoughts. And again, they might drop in a new word that gets you going, right? But your ultimate backup is to just ask for a moment. And of course, you can ask, go to the bathroom. You need to use the restroom. It's absolutely fine. These things happen. it's not in the examiner's interest to make this a horrible experience for you. They want to get the best out of you, and if that means you just need to take a little breather, then that's fine. Okay, so reassure yourself that you have options. All right. So that was a particularly lengthy video, quite a lot to cover. I'm sorry if it was a bit tedious and boring, but if you zoned out at some points, the great thing is it's a video, so you can go back and double check. Okay, and as always, if you've got any further questions, drop me a line or book a one-to-one. Now we still have a bit more to cover, so I will see you in the next video. Bye bye for now.